Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. It's always exciting, the podcast from my bedroom. As always, during this time, we're all in quarantine. And today, we're going to talk about something really interesting. And I would like to welcome Pedro to our podcast. Welcome here.
Thank you, Ole. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. And I'm excited to be part of it to speak a little bit about this Olympic situation and sports in general during this quarantine.
Awesome. And for those of you that haven't looked at any of our podcasts yet, feel free to check them out. Obviously, they're on Spotify, iTunes, podcasts, and all this stuff. We're also putting the video on YouTube. But essentially, the deal with the podcast is that we wanted to showcase, especially for young professional students, giving them something to think about when you guys are staying home and in quarantine, can't go to work or to school. And we wanted to give you some input about what is happening in the industry, giving you guys some pinpoints, some knowledge to work around. And today, like I said, we have a very interesting topic. We're still within the Olympic movement. So the topic today is COVID-19 and the Olympics, the voice of an Olympic athlete. So if you know something about, I'm not the Olympic athlete, so obviously it's Pedro. And we want to appreciate, of course, you taking the time. And for everyone out there, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background, first and foremost, your background, how you became an athlete, and also your work now, because now you're working at IOC, which is huge deal. So why don't you talk a little bit about your background?
Of course. I can say that I started playing beach volleyball professionally when I was 18. So I played for more or less 12, 13 years.
Right.
I played the London Olympic Games in 2012. I got the fifth place. Nice. I can say I lost to the champions, the Germans, which is a good excuse, right?
Right.
Not to win a medal.
When you first lose, let's just lose to the champions, right?
Yeah, of course. This is the best option.
Yeah.
Then after I retired from the courts, I worked in different fields. I worked at the Brazil NOC, the National Olympic Committee. I worked at the Olympics here in Rio 2016. Then
right.
After that, I went to get a master's degree in Switzerland. I worked for the IOC, and now I'm back in my hometown, which is Rio de Janeiro.
Nice. And you're in quarantine too, so it's a challenging time. But let us dive into actually some of your Olympic moment though, like in London. I mean, just share a little bit about how was that experience for you? What is your number one or two highlights that you'll take from it?
If I have two options, I would say first one is the opening ceremony.
Yeah.
Which was amazing. I mean, it's a great spectacle.
For sure.
And everyone's gathering inside the stadium,
Yeah.
all the kinds of athletes, nationalities, everyone.
Right.
And my second one, I guess I would say the first time I came into the court for the very first match it was supposed to be a very hard match. Right. We played the Norwegians. They were known as Brazilian killers.
Yeah.
They used to beat every Brazilian team, and we never played them before, so we were really not afraid, but it was a challenging moment to play them for the first time in the Olympics.
Yeah,
I think that was it. And I have a very bad moment, which was the very last point of my Olympics when we lost to the Germans. But yeah. I guess also that moment taught me a lot.
Right. No, and for sure. I mean, I know there's a lot of happening in on the beach volley side in Norway, and they've been preparing a lot for this Olympic, happening in Tokyo.
You guys have the very best team right now. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
very surprising.
I'm kind of surprised too. We I don't know what it is with Norway, if it's maybe the water or something. We're having something where we're happy to be weird, really good in these weird sports that we don't really think we would be good at,
Yeah, that's true.
But that's a good thing to have. But it's not about us, of course. And I just I can imagine, just being part of it, as an athlete itself. And there's obviously a lot of athletes sitting at home now, and just, we were supposed to be in the Olympics, very shortly, and then this delay happens because of the coronavirus. And it's a big challenge, of course, because it impacts so many things. But what I do like, and I know for sure you've been following a lot of what has been happening, and the IOC talked about that they were listening to the athletes on this situation, and to understand how are you gonna solve this challenge for them, and to keep them involved in the process. And for me, and for us, the listeners, I think it would be interesting to hear, what kind of questions would you raise during your time as an athlete if this sort of situation would come up? Like, what would be kind of like the first key things that this is some of the stuff we need to figure out,
Yeah, I guess my very first question would be, is there a deadline for decision? Well, I mean,
Right.
before they took the decision,
Right.
because it's very challenging for your preparation and your mental health,
Right.
not to know what's going to happen
Right.
soon. So I heard there were a lot of IOC meetings, IOC, IPC, and the organizing committee, trying to set up a date, trying to come to a conclusion, to a decision.
Right.
And I mean, if I were an athlete, I would just ask, when is the deadline for a decision?
Right.
Because I cannot just keep training or not training, actually,
Right.
without knowing when this is going to finish. You know what I mean? There
Yeah.
was a trick moment for them, and I think that's what they really wanted, to know when they would have a decision.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I mean, like, it impacts so many things, in their schedule. And as you said, you've been now essentially training for, I don't know, 3.5 years for like this very moment. And then suddenly, because of a virus, people like, wait a minute, let's just delay it a year. But I mean, like, it's the right thing to do. You don't want to impact, the health of the athletes, the people involved. And there's so many people involved in this big event. It's a massive event. And like, how do you see this impact the athletes' preparation? You were talking about, obviously, the workouts, but also the mental side. So like how do you see that, and like, how does it impact the preparations?
Well, you can see that through several point of views. I was doing some research before we started speaking
For sure.
to see what some famous athletes were saying
Right.
right after the decision was taken. Some of them, they said they were very disappointed, but I think everyone agreed it was the best decision that
Right.
they could take. But at the same time, I think next year we might see the best Olympic Games ever, because instead of 4 years, they will have 5 years to prepare for it.
Right.
But on the other hand, just think about this: if you were willing to retire after the Olympics,
Yeah.
now you have to compete for 1 more year. That
Yeah.
was kind of my case. I was not so sure that I would retire 1 year after the Olympics, but
Right.
it was a will. I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So just imagine if you have to compete 1 more year.
Right.
And another perspective, just think that, let's say the Brazilians that are qualified for beach volleyball,
Yeah.
they already qualified. They qualified
Right.
last year.
Right.
So instead of 6 years ahead of the Olympic Games,
Yeah.
they were qualified 1 year and a half ahead of the Olympic Games.
Right.
I'm not so sure if the best athletes at the moment will be competing next year. But if they're
Right.
still the best athletes, this will be the best Olympic Games ever. The athletes will be better prepared than any other edition of the Olympic Games.
Interesting. But from a mental standpoint, though, like, how do you cope with something like this? Because obviously there's probably a lot of emotions going around from, like, what is happening? Okay, it's made a decision, and then now it's planning. Like, how would you kind of like see this from your side if like if you were in those shoes, like, and say it was in
Yeah.
2012? well, what would be your mindset, and how are you turning that around to, like you said, now it's that it's going to be the best possible Olympic year ever, next year.
Well, I guess athletes, they adapt all the time.
Right.
So I think this second week will be, I would say, tough for them, not to know exactly what to do when the Olympic qualification will be back, the events and everything else.
Right.
But it's just a moment to stop and rethink all the strategies, the planning, everything that you were supposed to do in, let's say, 3 months.
Yeah.
Now you're supposed to do in a year and 3 months.
Right.
So it's just a matter of planning, and I guess the trainers and sports science will be very challenged during this period to know exactly what to do, so the athletes reach their peak.
Right.
1 year and 3 months ahead of now.
Right. So that's kind of like a next follow-up question though, because I mean, like, everyone talk about the peak, right? And reaching that and preparing essentially those 4 years for reaching the ultimate peak at the Olympics, and now essentially, do you think it's too like, are the athletes in a phase now where they're about to reach the peak, or is it about like too early so they can still like map it out, like, so they stretched it out that year to like reach that peak? Because obviously I'm not like a pro athlete or anything, so I've done my fair share in the gym and stuff, but but from like your planning perspective and like, where do you see this?
Well, I guess it depends on the sport, on the country, and everything else. Just an example, the American swimmers, they have the trials, I guess, a month before the Olympics, or it's a very short time before the Olympics.
All right.
So right now they wouldn't be in their peak for sure. But for some others, like in my time, I got my qualification, I guess, 2 months before the Olympics started. So right now would be my peak because I was still trying to qualify. So it depends a little bit on the sport and the qualification system of the sport, of the country, and everything else. But as I said before, you have to adapt. You have to plan again and again and again until. And I guess if you're an Olympic athlete, you have some people behind you that can support you in this time, and they would know what to do best.
And I think you mentioned something really key there too, is that if you're an athlete out there, and I mean, like, whether you're an Olympic athlete or not, I think it's like, have the team around you, to help you in this stage now. And as you mentioned, like, your coaches, your sports scientists, and your team around you will be key in order to help you reach that peak, because you're not alone. And I think what I've been thinking a lot about in this time too is that of course, like, the challenging being a startup, it's the entire sport industry is essentially on hold, and you notice how it is from your side, and essentially every country, every person are being impacted by it. And with that, also everyone understands, right? So like, everyone is the same position, which I think is also a huge plus, if you get my point, because like, everyone
is at home,
right? and I think that would be key, in terms of like understanding, like there will not be anyone at the Olympic Games next year that would have been in a more favorable position, in a sense, like, if you get my point. So,
I don't think there will be, no. But let's say that if I come from big Olympic country, my NOC, my federation, they have more money and more ways to support me.
Right.
On the other hand, if you come from a small country, you prepare during the events and on the road. That can be challenging for them if they're at home all the time now. But using a home example, our NOC has been supporting all the athletes, no matter what sport they practice, trying to keep them active and training as much as possible inside their homes. and they're focusing very much on the mental health right now. That's
Right.
the number one priority,
For
which
sure.
anyone can do.
Right.
But again, during this period, if you come from a small country that you don't get so much support, it can
Right.
be challenging for you if you have the Olympics postponed for more than 1 year.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's essentially what you say there. The key thing will be, the mental aspect. And from your viewpoint there, and like, what do you think kind of mental initiatives will the athletes take now in order to prepare, for that one extra year journey? What would you do, in this position?
Well, I would do what I always did when I got injured. I would try to learn more about my sport, to learn more about my
Right.
opponents. I remember that every time that I got back from an injury, I
Yeah.
either won a tournament or I played very well
Right.
because I knew things. I discovered things that before, when I was not injured, I didn't have the
Right.
time to do,
Right.
to be taught.
Yeah.
So this is a very good moment, and also to keep your head active,
Right.
thinking about the sport, thinking about the movements, thinking about the skills and technique.
Right.
It's, as I said before, it's a good moment for learning and leveraging some opportunities that you might see.
Right. So I think, like, it's interesting though, because you're almost putting it in like an injury position. Like, what, in
You
a
can
sense,
say so,
I mean, like,
yeah,
in a sense it is, because
yeah.
something is been taken away from you, and now you're just again, this is why we're doing the podcast too, right? To keep people like on their toes, and keep people engaged about like what is happening, and not like just sitting at home, you know putting their head under the blanket and and just like, okay, let me wait, until like it's over. Let's be proactive, do something about it. And I really like that. I think it's a really good mental advice of what, like, focus on what you can do something with, and utilize the time that you have in order to prepare, whether that's through other stuff that you can do that will still, you will come out, like, at the end of the day, you will be in a better position a year from now, because at the end you can't do anything about the past, right? It is what it is. Decision is made. Now it's about
Yep.
looking forward. And we talked a lot about, like, as you said, like, obviously the athletes that are in the Olympics are there for a reason. They're pro athletes. They've been doing this, competing at a high level, and like you said, they're well at adapting, to the new situation. Where do you see, like, do you think, like, how long will that time span take, before you're adapting, or like how many weeks or months are we talking about before they're like, okay, now I'm here, I'm ready, I'm just gonna push that, or I don't know.
Well, I wish I could answer to that question because we don't know how long this quarantine will take.
Right.
Um, I really don't know because the longer it takes, the
Yeah.
longer it will take for the athletes to get ready again. I
Right.
mean, if you're home for a month,
Right.
maybe in a month or two you're ready to compete again. But if you're home for 3 months,
Yeah.
depending on the country, like Italy or France or
Right.
Spain, let's say you are home for 3 months, it's
Yeah.
going to take much longer for you to be ready again at the Olympic level,
All right.
which is not like playing any other tournament.
All right.
So it's challenging to answer the question. I wish I knew it.
Well, that's why we're raising it, right? So we can discuss it. But
Yeah, I mean, you could start a poll on your website, on
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
social media.
Let's see if we can get like some Olympic athletes to get involved, and see how long time do you think it takes before you're ready.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
get like some movement out there. No, but I think you're, like, as you said, it all depends on the country, right? And where things are going. And what we can do something with is what we like, how we spend our time. And just from like a sport industry perspective, like, how can the sport industry now help prepare the athletes for next year? I know we talked like minor things about it, but like, what can the sport industry do, in order to help the athletes?
Well, I guess they can help us to improve not us. I'm a
Right.
former athlete, but they can help the athletes to improve their training sessions. I
Right.
mean, I've been seeing a lot of how to call that on Instagram, lives. They call them lives.
Live.
People training at home. I
Right.
mean, and I've never seen those movements and
Right.
those apparel, and I'm 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 very excited to see what's next after this
Right.
quarantine, and how people will train, and not only train professionally at
Right.
sport, but going to the gym and training outside.
Right.
Um, it's very different, um, and I'm also surprised to see how some, not only sponsors but also organizations, like I saw that NBA is having a tournament that starts on Friday
Right.
with some NBA pro players like Kevin Durant,
Yeah.
and I'm like, imagine if you could do this on beach volleyball and on other sports.
Yeah.
It's a way of keeping you focused,
Right.
keeping a way of you thinking about strategies played on PS4. It's really hard. I mean,
Right.
all those tactics and the strategies, they
Yeah.
could help the game to evolve as well.
Right. No, no, for sure. And I think talking a little bit about, again, from sports scientist perspective, and like in this initiatives, like what are your coaches, what are your your staff and team around you doing to prepare and help you, adapt to the current situation? I think they have to be pretty much on point, like from day one that decision was made, and say, okay, we just sit down, we map out everything from scratch again, and now we just like, where our level and where do we go from here? And I really like what you said in being creative in the sports environment, right? In terms of not only like your workouts, but like what tools, what resources can you use now? And this is the time to be creative, right? Because we're all sitting at home, and we're like, and just trying to make the best out of it. And I even saw like on the news where, our Norwegian football series, we're supposed to start like about like earlier, like this month, or like last month, and we were having like some teams in top of Norway, in Tromsø, like farthest up all the way where it's snow and all this stuff, a lot of snow. And they were literally just creating like this like kind of like circuit track, right, where they essentially just like we're running up a snowy hill with like wood under wood under, like Vikings, and just diving
You
under
see,
like
athletes always
showcase.
adapt.
And yeah, I mean, like, you just got to do what you got to do, right? And they were like
Of course,
so
yeah.
tired, so tired. And everyone was
I
super
can
excited
imagine.
about it, because like, I mean, you're not sitting home, you're doing something about it, you're taking initiative, and you got to stay fit. And I think, as you said, we will probably see a lot of cool new creative ways of staying healthy, staying fit. And I think also what is going to be key is that the athletes also show, that we're in this, we're ready mentally, giving some advice, to people as well, of like, how are you going to keep the momentum going, even if you're at home? You don't necessarily need a gym. I'm really sorry for the gym industry right now, but
Yeah.
I mean, like, at the same time, I think, as you said, we got to look positive on it. We got to see of how we can, come up with new initiatives, new creative ways of performing at the, like, for them to perform at the best possible ability a year from now. But what is certain is that the Olympics going to happen next year. I think, as you said, I hope it's going to be an amazing, nonetheless, it's going to be an amazing event and an Olympic
Well,
Games.
yeah.
Let's hope, and I think, as you said, like, the athletes will adapt, and they will find a way to probably blow our minds, out of proportions, as they do every these games. It's amazing to watch, and you're extremely fortunate and well deserved to be part of one as an athlete, which is crazy. And with that, I would like to thank you, Pedro, for the time. It's been a pleasure. I know we can talk about this probably like, for hours and
For
hours.
hours, yeah.
There's so much to dive into though, and then we could probably just talk like 2 hours just about like how it was for you being in the Olympics in 2012.
But you know what, Ole? You mentioned before that everyone has to work forward, and
Yeah,
that's the main point. That's the key point for the athletes right now. I mean, the decision is taken.
yeah,
What we have to do from now on? We have 1 year and 3 months, and not only 3 months from now. Let's make it different. And I think this is a very good opportunity also for the sports to evolve.
right,
I mean, you can develop new, I don't know, new gear, new
right.
rules, something for the people to enjoy more the sport. So it's a lot of opportunities now that can come with this crisis. So
Yeah.
it's for me as a spectator right now, it's very exciting.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also working in the industry, right? It's like now is the time. Of course, it's challenging, but now is the time to, think different and look outside your box of like what you've been usually doing, because now you have
And
the
we have a
time.
lot of time to think, right?
You do. And it's a
Yeah.
perfect opportunity. And me and my coworker Eduardo, we talked about it a lot, and we said like, this is the time for us to, see where do we take, where do we go from here. And the podcast was one of those things, because we believe in creating value, whether that's for students, young professionals, or what it might be. We said, okay, let's do this as a way of like keeping people engaged, keeping people involved. And the athletes will do the same thing. They will adapt, they will find their way. And like I said, in a year we're going to see some amazing results. And before that, we're probably going to see a lot of cool ideas, initiatives, creative ways of working out, staying mentally prepared, and it's going to be exciting to see. So we're about to wrap up. It's about like a couple minutes left, and Pedro, once again, I would like to thank you for the time. It's been an enormous pleasure to have you here. And for those of you out there, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, kind of like with an athlete focus, which I think was appropriate, for everything happening. We're always talking about like the business side. We've been like economics and like, how are the Olympic committees thinking about this, but at the end, like there's no Olympic Games without the athletes. So so we got to get some perspective there too. And Pedro, I appreciate that you shared your thoughts, your background on this with us. And with that, I would like to say we always finish with "Vi snakkes," which means "see you later" in Norwegian. Thank you,
Yeah,
Pedro.
thank you, Ali. It was a pleasure to join you in this meeting and this podcast. And one last thing,
For
that
sure.
was very excited to see how the IOC was focusing on the athletes, on their mental health, on
Yeah,
their best preparation, and I think everyone took the right decision. And exciting times to come ahead of us. It's well, not right now, but when this all finishes, uh, we'll all be good.
for sure, for sure. It's gonna be some exciting times, and as you said, stay positive. Look at how you can make the most out of it, and focus on what you can do. So,
Yeah.
thank you, Pedro, and we'll talk very shortly. And I wish you all the best in this quarantine. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll talk very soon.
Cool. Thank you, Ole. Congratulations on the podcast idea, and looking forward to see it live.
Perfect. Thank you, Pedro. We'll talk soon.
Ciao.